Good afternoon, London. Well, you can show me some more love. Good afternoon. Right, thank you. So, I stand between lunch and you guys. So, it's not a very envious position to be in. So, I'll do my best to keep it engaging and keep it light-hearted. The topic I'm going to talk about is not light-hearted though. It's a very serious topic, something I care very deeply about. So, I'm Deepak. As I was introduced, I work for JP Morgan as the Director of AI Research over there. And the talk you're going to hear today is based on my prior experience. Standard disclaimer, these are my views, these are not views of any company, any organization I worked for before. Any characters, any purposes are just mine, they're fictitious, bears no resemblance. It's important I say that because the topic is quite sensitive. Right, so this is what we'll talk about today. We'll just talk about my experience a little bit. We'll go into a day in my life. It's important you see that because what I'm going to show you is the person behind the scenes building this. We'll set up the context for the situation we're going to talk about. We'll describe the problem, and I'll give you my solution. It won't be the perfect solution. It won't be the best solution. It will be a solution. And for me, it is important to put it out there because there's a lot of talk about how should we do it? What is ethical AI? How is it done right? So, I'm putting stuff out there for people to see, to observe and comment and discuss because I don't think it's a solution that fits everybody all the time, but it's a solution for people to comment on. And then we'll end with key takeaways, and then I'll leave some time for questions. So, this is me, this is where I've been working, this is what I've been doing over the last period of years. And what's important to note is that I started off with a great husband, and then my wife looked at it and said no. So, I downgraded myself to good husband now, and I think I'm a better dad than I'm a husband. So, that's important to know. All this is to say that the kind of work I have done has been primarily shaped by the places I've lived in, the companies I worked for, and the people I worked with. And it's been all over the place. I've been born and brought up in India, worked in America for 6 years, and I've been here for 4 years. So, I've got the opportunity to work with a very multicultural, very diverse environment, which I think has set me up very well to do the work I've been trying to do. So, this is the product that I shipped at Microsoft. This was a formative product. It taught me a lot. So, what you're going to hear me say is based on my experience, but it's not entirely what I did there is proprietary, it's Microsoft, but it taught me a lot. So, this is something we released back in 2019. This is released to 2 million users. We got a very good Google Play Store rating. Anybody here works in B2C and publishes apps on Google Play Store? It's a very brutal world out there. People will tell you exactly what they think in very colorful language. So, for you to get 4.3 is a big deal, and I'm very proud we did that. And over 400 days of usage, 2 million people gave us that rating. So, quickly show you the product. By the way, before I do, anybody here use SwiftKey keyboard? Well, one person here, 2 people here. This was London based. This is made in London. This is a UK product, UK experience. So, if you're not using it already, please go give it a spin. So, this thing was launched there. I'll play the video, you hear some music, enjoy that, and we'll come back to the actual talk. Right. So, in that video you saw that, saw a lot of faces. That's the actual team who built the product. I asked my designer, why shouldn't I be there? He said, no, you're going to claim all the benefit that you did everything. So, my face wasn't there, but it's all the team who built the product. So, we're very proud to see the team do the work. So, before I go on, I build AI products. I work for JP Morgan. I used to work with Microsoft before. And as I was building the presentation, I was going to talk about what do I actually do at work. And then during the pandemic, I asked my family around to say, what do you think I do? So, these are some important people in my life. Let's see what they think about this. So, I asked my wife, what do you think I do? This is what she said. And I asked my son, what does he think I do? This is what he says. So, I asked my customers, what do they think I do? This is what they said. Then I asked my developers, the people who I work with every day, what do they think I do? And this is what they said. And then the most important person in the room, I asked my manager, what he thinks I do. Any guesses? This is what he said. Typical, right? Always good to have your manager pushing you to do more things beyond this. All right. So, now let me set up the context of the actual talk and explain to you what I am going to do here today. So, we will first cover some of the background of AI, what do you mean by the ethics of AI, what are the types of AI we will talk about today, and what is the ecosystem of AI, who are involved in this game of AI and what goes on there. Then we will give you a little bit of context on what goes behind the scenes of the builders of AI, the users of AI, and the process of building AI. Based on that, we will quickly touch upon the core two elements of AI in my mind, strategy and the culture for it, and then I will leave you with best practices and open up the floor for questions. So, this thing moved, right. Before I do that, I want to give you a takeaway, and the takeaway is this. Unfortunately, it does not exist. There is no silver bullet. There is not one thing I can tell you that can solve world peace for everybody. If you are waiting for that, then I already told you it is not going to happen. But if you are still sitting back, enjoy the discussion and see if it sparks an idea in your head. So, as I was looking for this, it is a very loaded word, ethics. So, what is the definition for ethics? So, this is the Wikipedia definition. This is what Wikipedia says is ethics. Look at the words that have been highlighted. These are very big words. There is morality, there is good and evil, wrong, virtue, vice, justice and crime. Can you tell me, has ethics been solved for anything before AI? Parenting? Manufacturing, software, finances? No, it is not been solved. It is an emerging subject, and it is something that keeps on happening over a period of time. But the reason why AI is such an important aspect and why ethics and AI is talked about is because AI has the unique ability to combine cognitive abilities of humans all across the globe in one thing. It is basically taking millions and millions of brains and putting it in one place. That is why it is so important that we talk about ethics and we get the definition right. So, now that is the background, what is the other background? What are the types of AI? What goes on in the field of AI? Now, I built this slide like 2 to 3 years ago, and I thought I will update it for now, and it is never going to get updated. I am never going to get it perfect because it keeps evolving all the time. So, what I have tried to give you here is a flavor of what are the techniques to do AI and what are the various applications to do AI right. For example, machine learning was the first step to get there. We use data, we build statistical models, and then we learnt our way about AI. And then now the newest trend is deep learning, where there is data, there is an output function or an objective you want to get to, and then you let math loose on it, and based on that output function you learn the rules of the game. You learn the rules how data and how knowledge is being processed. Because of that, there are various applications that are emerging. Now, if you see this, I have tried to put some the 5 senses around here. Yeah. So, there is a sense for the ear, natural language processing, both listening and talking. There is a sense for the eye, the machine vision, and then speech, machine ability to convert from text to speech or speak to text. Now, there are some other there are more interfaces for us to interact with the world. There is a sense of touch, there is a sense of love. Do we have an AI for that? Not yet, but we will get there. So, the whole what I want you to think about is AI basically is a way for us to augment our 5 senses and how we interact with the world, and right now we are going about it in 2 ways, which is the classical machine learning approach and the deep learning approach. So, that is the second type of background I want to give you, the types of AI and the applications. And the last thing is the ecosystem of AI. What we typically see is the users of AI. I represent the builder of AI here today, but there is another class of the world which is the regulators of AI, whose job it is to look at both the builders and the users and make sure what is being built is being built correctly. Now, let us look at each one's incentives to get it right. For example, the builders are more, the creators are more interested in the commercials, in profitability, in repeatability, in scalability, in desirability and durability, because they want to make sure whatever they build is used by the most number of people for the longest amount of time for the most amount of profit. and they got their thinking sorted, which is completely right. And what do the users want? They want something beneficial, something innovative, something desirable and also durable, because they don't want to use 10 products in 5 months. They want to keep there. Now, it's the regulators who come in between and say, we'll play both sides of the aisle. We'll tell you what we think is important in terms of the implementation. So, what do they care about? They care about diversity, they care about inclusion, they care about explainability, fairness, accountability, so on and so forth. Now, all of these 10 points are a way to cover for the ethics of AI. Now, anyone here thinks these 10 points are good enough? I don't think so. Has any tech organization, has anybody got it absolutely right? No, but they've made a fair start. They've started on this journey to say, we will build a formulae for ethics, and we'll build a formulae around these 10 words that describe the human condition that have existed for a very long time, and then we'll go about building AI to see if that's what makes sense for us. So, now you understood the background. Let's go a little bit of the context of the problem. So, the way I look at the context is two kinds of people, the builders and the users of AI. Let's look at the builders, these people, basically all of us, someone like me, someone like you, someone like your friend, someone like anybody else who's behind the scenes building AI. And what we typically don't appreciate or don't understand is who are the users of AI, and they are also the users of AI. We are all building products for ourselves, and there's always going to be an overlap. There's not going to be a perfect overlap. All the users of AI cannot be represented in the community of the builders of AI. But at least if you know this fact and you're able to demonstrate to yourself that the builders of AI are always going to be A, B and C, but the users of AI are going to be A, B, C, D, E, F up until Z. So, you're always going to have a gap between who builds it and who uses it. But at least I would say that for the context purposes, it's important to recognize that and document that, because then you are now beginning to understand your blind spots, what your shortcomings are and where are we going with it. So, builders and users of AI. Now, this is the building of AI. This is something that I do every day, and I look at this every day and say, how can we do better? So, what you see on top is the famous 4D design principles. Designing something, developing something, discovering the problem first, and then deploying the whole process. This is the general software development process, any process to build anything substantially well enough. Whereas at the bottom, this is very, very peculiar to AI. And as you can see, it always starts with another D, the data. So, you take the data, you split it into training and testing, you for the problem statement you have in hand, you go and build the AI model, you test the AI and deploy the AI. This is my everyday, day to day what I do in building AI. So, the question now becomes, we've examined the background, we've examined the context, the various kinds of AI, the types of AI, the builders and the users of AI, and the process to build AI. So, after all of this, what do we do next? What do we do with all the information we've achieved, we've taken into place, and how do we go about building a more ethical AI? And this is my proposal, my solution, and I'm happy to hear your thoughts about this. This is what I would do. So, remember I had those 4 Ds, those 4 Ds go on the top. The discovery, the design, the development, deployment, those are the 4 processes that will keep going all the time, but it does not stop there. It goes into the nitty-gritties of what it takes to build AI projects, what it takes to build AI, which is all of these things, which is defining who the customer is, representing the customer correctly. In our case, defining who the users are, making sure that the users are represented correctly, the discovery and the design. Then becomes development. It involves the whole cycle, which is data collection, data annotation, the model development. And then after that, the testing and the deployment process, testing it with customers and refining based on the feedback and launching it. So, these are the steps any AI project will take. Now, you interlace that with the AI principles we talked about earlier, fairness, transparency, accountability, all those keywords, you take that into the mix and then you ask a question, how am I doing? How did I do in discovery? in the phase of discovery, in the process of defining who my buyers are, against principle 1. Pick whichever principle. Microsoft has set of principles, Google has them, Amazon has them, the EU has them, some other countries have it. My key takeaway is you will never get the right set of principles. They are always change on context, based on who you are building for, based on what are you building, and based on where are you deploying, because the regulation in America is completely different. In EU is GDPR, but EU has their own laws coming into play, and the laws for India, for China are going to be different. So, you are never going to get it perfect all the time, but this is a way for you to make a start. So, pick your AI principles. I am saying 5, start with 5. Microsoft has 10, other people have 4. So, you will never get the right mix, maybe 50 is the right number, who knows, but start from that point and then start measuring yourself to say, well, against AI principle 1, say accountability. How did we solve for accountability in the customer profiling process? Did we ensure that the person we spoke to, could we define them in the correct way? For example, in the traditional sense of race, ethnicity and gender. But that nomenclature, that discussion point is now changing, because gender, when I started this process, was something you were born with, but now you can choose to have a gender different from what you were born with. So, now there is a whole concept of the cisgender. So, this will keep on evolving, but the whole point is I look at you and I call you a male and female, but accountability means that I should let you define who you think you are. Are you male or are you female, or you do not want to represent yourself that way, which is totally fine. But the question is, do we let people do that? Do we have some white space in our minds to say we can let people represent themselves any way which they want on the conditions of race, ethnicity and gender, and then rank ourselves to say how well did we do. Again, you want to get a 5 out of 5, you are not going to get a 4 out of 5, but at least if you are going to get 3 out of 5, you know where you stand. But you also know the blind spots and say, okay, I can do these other things to get there, because guess what, AI projects do fail quite frequently. If you are going to go down the path of saying I want a 5 out of 5 for every single box here, you are never going to launch the AI project, never. So, you have this deadline of I want to launch it by this thing. I am saying that have a scorecard for yourself and say, if I achieve 3.5 across all, I am going to launch. That is better than 0, that is better than not launching, because you learn from it along the way. So, before I go on how to enable this, I want to ask a question. How many of you have done this thing where you have had success with AI strategy? Anyone? One person. I wonder why only one person has attained it. I suspect the answer is this: because culture eats strategy for breakfast. This is more and more becoming increasingly true, because those strategy, those transformation initiatives that you run, which are not embedded in the culture of doing data based decision making, are most likely to fail. So, you saw that slide before where I had this nice beautiful table. When you do that, that can't be your strategy, that cannot be your transformation initiative, that must be your culture, that must be where you start from to get to a point where you want to go to. Right. So, before I go to my last slide, which is the best practices and how you think you can do, I want to just tell you the top 4 challenges I faced when I did AI over the many period of years. For example, gender diversity was very crucial, and in one case, one AI project, it actually cost me money and it cost me time, because we did not have enough women in the team. So, if you want to build this product for the users, the builders must be representing the users. Not enough women in the team cost me money, cost me time, because I had to go seek help from a vendor to do this for us. So, all those people who talk about gender and diversity had a problem, I have a number for you. I have a concrete number that had I had more gender diversity in one of the AI projects I did, I could have achieved success much faster and for lesser amount of money. But that is not the whole point. It started there. Now we started questioning what other blind spots do we have in terms of the challenges, and what number can we achieve, because business likes numbers. When I quantified it like this way, business loved the numbers and said, okay, we see you now, we see the cost, we see the time, we will make sure we have more women in the team and it will help us. The next thing was aiming for perfect. Put that table up for you. I wanted 4.9 because as a product manager, my brain thinks metrics. There is nothing more important to me than a spreadsheet full of numbers, because numbers are the only thing that are objective truth and that will tell me what to do there. But I was aiming too high. 4.9 was way too high. And then testing of these AI products, especially for example, when you look at Alexa, which is an AI first product, you have to test it thoroughly, because what experience you don't want to have is what happens when the Alexa fails. It's a box, it does nothing. How does that work? What happens if it gives you the wrong answer? What happens if it doesn't understand the question you have? So, the way we test software products in manufacturing products in the real world is entirely different from how you interact with and test AI products. So, we must think of that far more deliberately than in other cases. And lastly, in my case, for me it was important to be very, very accurate. For example, if I shook my head, the character I wanted it to shake the head in real time with as much accuracy as possible, whereas the models we deployed, it did do that. For example, if I shook my head, it shook it exactly that much, but it was very slow. It had a 6-degree tilt to the left, 6-degree tilt to the right, which is representing me. But you want 6-degree, but you want it like this. You don't want it like this and like that. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants a slow product experience. So, I had my metrics wrong. So, I chose accuracy over latency, but people wanted latency. People wanted faster interaction, they were okay with a little less accuracy as you went in. So, those are challenges I faced. Here are the last slide, which is what are the best practices I have for you. Do not have a strategy for AI. If you are already thinking about it, I say won't work, but have a culture of database decision making. This sentence alone will help you think in fundamentally new ways, because each time you think of a strategy or a transformation initiative, if your culture does not support that, culture is how you operate in your day to day work, how you think about your peers, are you able to champion them, are you able to clap for them when they are successful, are you able to speak truth to power, what kind of environment you are working, that is all culture, and that must be database decision making. That will help you succeed. Yeah, this is the second thing I have seen a lot of people saying, oh, which are the right AI principles? As anybody here can tell me, have they done parenting absolutely right? Yeah, people are smiling. I fail every day and my wife tells me that. She is right, it is hard, but I do it. I did it better than yesterday and I read books about it and I stress over it. Sometimes my kid tells me exactly how wrong I am. I take that feedback and then I move on. So, you will never get the right set of AI principles. You will never have the 100 words that is going to be the meaning for being ethical. You are never going to get that, but look at what other people have done. Take a look at the medical industry. I do not say that they have done it right, but they are attempting to do it right. Look at the regulation in EU. You will have benchmarks everywhere, which will give you a launch pad to start there, but it must be preceded by the culture of database decision making, because then you will say, I have the right culture, I am going to use somebody else's principles and I am going to start working on it. Now, the third thing I am saying is objective and subjective metrics. Why I say that is, it is important for you to get a score of 4.9, but the subjectivity is 4.9 across what? For example, I built an AI project, AI and effort, and if I measured it for inclusivity, I can't get a 4.9 for all men. I have to get it 4.9 for all genders. So, this subjectivity matters, and as you can appreciate, men's faces, thankfully or non-thankfully, are quite boring. Facial hair, no facial hair, hair on the head, no on the head. Same way, women's faces far more complex, far more intricate, far harder to deploy with AI and model with AI. So, you can't have 4.9 for both of them. 4.9 for women faces is much harder. In different lighting environments, for different skin tones and different faces is much harder. So, you might have 4.9 for men, but for women maybe 4.3 is good enough, or the other way around. You would not know until you start on the journey. So, have the objective metrics, but be brave to look at the subjectivity aspect also, because both are important. And lastly, done is better than perfect. I have never launched a perfect product. I hope to God I never get to a point where I tell anybody the bravado that I am going to launch a perfect product that works for all the people all the time. Guess what? The product that works for everybody all the time does not exist. The iPhone can't launch, can't let you fly. It's not meant to be that. It's meant to be a device to communicate. So that doesn't exist. It won't exist. It's going to be quite hard for you to do. So get on the journey. Start with the culture. Make sure that you have the right AI principles. Pick from the few ones you see out there. Go with your objective subjective metrics and get it done. That's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepak. Do we have any questions? Yes, we do. Can we get the microphone across? If you just start by stating your name and where you're from, please. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Siano Musimi. I'm from Mark Sasson. I've got a... So I'm an academic philosopher by training, and ethics is... you say that it's a new thing, but ethics is as old as academic inquiry itself. And one of the things about ethics is that principles and laws don't win, intuitions win. You can throw all your analytic principles to make the best ethical systems, and you'll have a counterexample, and that's your theory done. The question I'd like to ask is, how much training do technologists have in their ethical intuitions? Because so many of the processes, I mean, we've seen it in industrialization, the digital age, or whatever, we can have a whole range of processes, but people who are malicious will just find ways of manipulating that. You talked about the accountability issue. That's not even an ethical problem, that's a knowledge problem. You just want to know the best way of knowing my gender, right? Who defines that accountability is a good and right thing? So rather than having technologists, I'm not saying you should employ a whole load of philosophers into all your industry, even though, by the way, 1 in every 2 philosophy departments across the Western world have PhD students doing the ethics of AI, so you should know about this. The question is, how much are you training your really clever technologists in their ethical intuition? Should the training of technology and ethics not go hand in hand?
Fantastic question. If that's what the start of the first question looks like, I'm already sweating about the next few ones. So his question was, how much are technologies trained in the ethical aspects of work? Clearly not enough. Clearly not enough. Because if we had been, we wouldn't have so many problems. And exacerbated by the fact that AI has such a disruptive potential to replace the mindsets and the thinking of so many, not enough. Not enough. My own experience has been by learning by doing, but I've read books in my own life. I try to keep an ethical life. For example, I don't invest in gambling or tobacco or alcohol or those kind of stocks, because that's just not who I am. But no, I've not had formal training, and what I would say is, it shouldn't be even for the clever ones. It should be for everybody, because ethics is not this alien concept that's only be applied. Ethics is part of your life. It should be passed. It should be integrated in who you are and what you become every day. So I would say it's not done enough. It should definitely be a part, especially for this thing. I was talking to Anand the other day, just now, saying if people are worried about ethics in AI, wait for the metaverse and the blockchain. It's going to get even worse there. So we have a very good opportunity to start here as the AI world is picking up pace and people are talking about it, to get ethics, to learn about it, to understand it, to debate it like this, and then hopefully we'll get it right by the time the other 2 big things come on play. I'll just say one last thing. Have you seen this Netflix series, The Good Place? If you have not, highly recommend it. It's a fantastic piece of storytelling, imbibed with the idea of ethics and accountability. I have never seen, and I'm getting goosebumps as I talk about it now, I've never seen something explained so beautifully in the real world and explained and acted upon so well. So take a look at that. I wouldn't say it replaces any of your ethical courses or knowledge, but it's a good start for you to think about ethics and a good frame of mind for you. Thanks for your question.
Okay, thanks for your question. You might want to continue that conversation at lunch, I think.
I will.
Okay, I have some slightly easier questions for you, hopefully. Sure. You mentioned there about it's important to have diversity of teams that are building AI. And does that mean you need a huge team to achieve success with AI? And when times are tight financially, like they are, or they will be, does that mean that it's a barrier to achieving what AI should be achieving?
I don't think you need a big team. I think you need a team that is brave enough and bold enough to say we have these shortcomings. Like for example, but there are some things you have to have. For example, I can't speak for a woman. I just can't speak for their whole experience because mine is a read experience. It's not a shared experience, it's not a lived experience. So some aspects you must have people in the room whom you are going to build for. For other aspects, if you start with the culture of saying, okay, we've got to have gender covered, maybe we think about race and ethnicity afterwards, the age and the ethnicity afterwards. But some things is a strict no, you must have it in the room, but then be a little more cultured about how you go about it, be a little more brave to say, okay, I think we got one thing covered, but few other aspects we are doing badly on. Can we pick it up? Can we have some proxies for that in some other way? So number is not the problem we have. I think the problem we have is getting started.
Okay, and again, just relating to something that you covered off there, you said how AI is touching on the senses at the moment of sight, hearing, and speech. You also said touch and love. I think you said at one stage that AI will be able to love us at some stage. Is that right?
Well, if you look at the recent rumors of AI being able to claims of AI being sentient based on some chats, you can even dream of that. But here's my take on it. See, we've not even been like today. We have not even defined where the mind is in the brain. We know where the PFC is, we know where the amygdala is, but ask any decent neuroscientist person where the mind is, they don't know. So good luck finding the mind and good luck defining the formula for love. You're doing badly defining the formula for ethics for crying out loud. So love is far away. So I don't think it's going to, we don't need to worry about AI replacing love as a construct. We have miles to go before we get there.
Okay, I'd love to continue this conversation. We are going to talk about your failed stand-up career at a later date as well. But for now, thank you, Deepak.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deepak. Take care.